To understand this film is to grasp what the bubble burst did not only to Japan's economy but to its psyche. Japan's bubble economy refers to the extraordinary asset inflation that took place in the late 1980s. It was driven by speculative real estate and stock market investments. After decades of post-war economic growth, or the so-called Japanese miracle, the nation had become a global industrial powerhouse. By the mid to late 1980s, Japan was flush with liquidity. It was visible as banks were lent freely, land prices skyrocketed, and a cultural ethos of endless prosperity took hold. This period was marked by the rituals of late capitalist consumerism, including conspicuous consumption, luxury branding, and the fetishization of Western modernity. The youth culture of the time mirrored this opulence. Tokyo became a world capital of fashion, nightlife, and technological chic. Office ladies, salarymen, and high school girls each became social archetypes bound to consumption as identity. But by the year 1991, the illusion collapsed. The Nikkei stock index crashed as speculative confidence evaporated, real estate values plummeted due to overinflated speculation, and Japan entered what is now known as the lost decade. In the wake of the crash, the human cause of Japan's economic illusion became clear. Unemployment rose, wages stagnated, and lifetime employment, or the bedrock of post-war social stability, began to erode. Japanese found themselves trapped in a paradox wherein they were surrounded by the remnants of a consumer paradise that now felt hollow, even grotesque. Hollow as symbols of affluence lost their meaning, even grotesque as the excesses of the past stood in stark contrast to the austerity of the present. By the mid to late 1990s, sociologists began identifying a crisis of purpose among the Japanese citizen, embodied by freighters and EETs, or not in education, employment, or training, and hikikomori. These are the figures who drifted between work, isolation, and quiet refusal of the narratives that once defined adulthood. The national mood had turned from exuberance to ennui. The future was no longer a horizon but a question mark. Hideaki Anno's Love and Pop arrives at the tail end of this historical hangover. It is a film made from the debris of that economic and emotional collapse. This film is a digital mosaic of teenage alienation in a society still haunted by its own unfulfilled promises. Set against the backdrop of a Tokyo stripped of the excesses of the 1980s, yet still haunted by its consumerist logic, Love and Pop examines what it means to come of age in a society where the promise of the future has collapsed, leaving only the rituals of desire, consumption, and performance as substitutes for meaning. This film centers on Hiromi, a high school girl who, along with her friends Nao, Chisa, and Chico, participates in enjo kōsai, or compensated dating. This refers to a transactional, short-term dynamic in which people who practice this, men or women, exchange time, attention, or ambiguous companionship for money, luxury items, or material support, often from strangers and, most disturbingly, older men. In the film's context, these exchanges are driven less by economic desperation than by desire itself. The desire for experience, status, and self-definition within a society that teaches these young women to equate value with visibility and consumption. While enjo kōsai was not new, the conditions of post-bubble Japan made it emblematic of a society slowly losing coherence behind its composed exterior. This practice became a cultural flashpoint, a source of media panic, and a tabloid obsession in 1990s Japan. Japanese media back then sensationalized this phenomenon as moral decay or a symptom of youth gone astray, as this act was framed not as a social consequence of economic disillusionment, but as a personal failure of morality and femininity. But the filmmaker's approach is always more sociologist than moralist, as he sees it differently. He frames enjo kōsai as the logical after-effect of a society that had long commodified everything, including intimacy. It was made possible by showing how this teenagers' world operates entirely within the logic of transaction. wherein every gesture, desire, and connection filtered through money or material exchange. The film's Tokyo is a landscape of hollow plenty, an urban labyrinth of shopping districts, train stations, vending machines, and blinking pagers where technologies of connection only deepen the sense of isolation, exposing a society sustained by the illusion of constant interaction and consumption. Every space in this film feels temporary, it feels transitional, as if built atop the ruins of the bubble. These teenagers inhabit the aftermath of the said system wherein they are not rebels or victims but participants in a system that both empowers and exploits them. Empowering in a way that grants them momentary agency through consumption and self-presentation, yet exploiting in a manner that reduces their identities to commodities within a patriarchal and capitalist gaze where choice itself is already conditioned by the very system they appear to control. The filmmaker also translates Japan's macroeconomic trauma into intimate, everyday texture. Hiromi and her friends are teenagers of the bubble that were born into affluence, coming of age amid its collapse.
取る枚数が多いと、使い捨ては不経済だった。
The film's use of digital video operates as both aesthetic experiment and historical critic. Its grainy, unstable textures dismantle the high-definition fantasies of the 1980s, replacing the sleek imagery of affluence with the anxious visual noise of surveillance. In rejecting the cinematic polish that once embodied Japan's consumerist dreams, Ano exposes a world where every image feels mediated, transactional, and morally ambiguous. The camera's voyeurism mirrors the predatory gaze of the men who pursue these girls, yet it also implicates the viewer, turning spectatorships into a site of ethical tensions. With this, viewers become participants in the same economy of looking that commodifies intimacy. Given the film's radically experimental visual language that feels decades ahead of its time, it's astonishing to consider that this film was released in 1998. Ano's approach to digital cinematography was not merely stylistic bravado, it was a conceptual extension of the film's critic. His use of extreme angles, handled disorientation, and fragmented framing transforms Tokyo into a visual labyrinth, echoing the characters' alienation within a hypermediated society. Each frame hums with kinetic energy and anxious futurism, as if the camera itself were struggling to keep up with a generation whose lives unfold through screens and surfaces.
それはとても難しい。きっと私にはできない。
In the end, Love and Pop is less a story than a cultural diagnosis. It captures Japan at a moment of profound transition, after the collapse of the economic miracle, yet before the full onset of digital hypermodernity, when the emotional infrastructure of the nation was still reeling from its own undoing.